Hello again, everybody, from a formerly snowy but still cold Louisville, Kentucky, a very special, sickly edition of the Jim Cornette Experience. I am Jim Cornette, and boy, what a show we have today, a show about almost nothing. David Arquette's not happy with me. That's something that's almost nothing. We're going to talk about the last week in my life, and I'm sure there'll be some unplanned hilarity and jocularity to ensue. And joining me in this, if he can make it all the way through the show, Hawaiian Brian, the podcasting lion, the king of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network, Mr. Co-host to you. He's Swammy's pappy, the French toast fanboy, the plague-ridden playboy, the sick, great Brian Last.
Aloha, Jim. I feel like shit. How are you?
And I'm not doing much better myself. I am mentally burnt and beaten down and worn down, as well as physically. At least I'm not ill, although I am a little snurfly from this ridiculous weather. But you have been ill for several days, near death's door, but have agreed to come on the program because elsewise it'd just be me. And I don't have the energy either. So we're going to get through this together, you and I, today on for the millions and millions of Cult of Cornette listeners and the Legion of Last who are starved for real entertainment every week until we come on the air, and then they get fed. We're going to feed them here today on the program, are we not?
What are we feeding them exactly?
Well, a bunch of bullshit so far, but we'll try to. I'm going to save Arquette for later because he's not happy with me. But we do have to mention at the top of the program, and I just saw this when I got on Twitter this morning, that Tommy Billington, Dynamite Kid, passed away this morning. And, you know, normally I always say I hate to do obituaries because usually I knew the person personally. In this case, believe it or not, I never met the Dynamite Kid.
I mean, other than seeing them in an airport when he was in the WWF, there's nowhere you would have come close to running into him.
Well, but that's one of those things, though, that people out there think, just like they think, well, you know, every football player ever knows each other or whatever. Every wrestler ever knows each other. But I was a huge fan, so I can sit back with some detachment and say, obviously, our sympathies. But at the same time, I can just look at him professionally because I never met him. I know he was a somewhat controversial and irksome individual to some behind the scenes, and he had a great book where he was pretty honest about it, and there's all those stories. But just watching him in the ring, the first time I actually got to see him, I'd heard the name and obviously in newsletters because he was already in Calgary, but to actually see him, it was impossible before the pre-videotape era. But then I think it was pretty much when he went to Japan, and the matches with Tiger Mask were the first time I got to. So what an introduction, right? You see Tiger Mask and Dynamite Kid both for the same time against each other. But has there ever been anybody like that in the business? A lot of Benoit's offense especially was patterned after, obviously, Dynamite Kid because he was his hero. But he was built differently and everybody was built differently and couldn't do just all the wild shit. And I was at Davey Richards reminded me on offense, but nobody ever sold like Dynamite Kid, just that flailing in the air fucking wildness. And nobody ever did everything he did they? Did anybody ever work exactly like Dynamite Kid?
No, a lot of guys tried, Benoit being the biggest example. But that's one of the things when you look at it. It's a very complicated legacy, because there are enough stories that he told and stories that many people around him told of just complete sociopathic behavior, just complete nutcase. He's also a cautionary tale for the wrestling industry in terms of health, but in terms of his work, you could argue he's one of the most revolutionary wrestlers of all time. And what we're seeing today with junior heavyweights in main event positions wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Dynamite Kid.
But when you go back and watch the matches, and he and Tiger Mask, everybody says, oh, Cornette hates that flippy shit. Well, no, they actually did flippy shit that was because there's never been another athlete just quite like Sayama either in his day, when he was young, etc. The flippy shit they did, if it didn't make sense, at least it looked so fucking good and so fucking fast that you bought it somehow, right? You could suspend disbelief with most of those guys' shit, no matter what they did. I mean, and there's Sayama looking like fucking Bruce Lee in one take in front of people. You know, it was, and nobody had ever done shit like that before. So yeah, the junior heavyweight, light heavyweight, cruiserweight, whatever distinction they made it, they started that night, that run in New Japan, and right when everybody started getting videotapes.
Yeah, they did it first, and interestingly enough, they also made it look like they weren't practicing. A lot of guys today, it looks like they're running through a routine. They did it first, and it looked raw. It looked like it was happening on the fly.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a perfect way to say it. It was like, not like this is our routine. It was they're getting this as they go, and sometimes they were. But if you look at even Dynamite Kid's work in this country, where obviously against different people he had to tone that down. The stuff he did that wouldn't have been really exponentially greater a risk than normal wrestling, much less when he went over the top and, you know, took the fucking bumps off the top of the ladder out into the front row in Calgary or whatever. That shit was good enough. He would have got over anyway. He went over and above and beyond because he could, and it was, you know, wild and incredible. But if he'd have toned back the 30 or 40% of the over the top shit and just been that worker, he still would have got over and been a top guy.
You know, one of my favorite matches of all time is Dynamite versus Tiger Mask at Madison Square Garden. And it's not as so much about the match as it is about the moment and seeing those fans in New York, those hardened fans who have been watching these big wrestlers for years. Their eyes are open. First they see these smaller guys, and then immediately they start doing their moves. And it just changed wrestling right there. You hear the pops, you see people looking around at each other as they're clapping. They can't believe what they're seeing. It's really an amazing moment hearing that Garden crowd get turned on to wrestling they'd never seen before.
Well, and then here's the funny part of it, because we were waiting to see that match because we'd already seen, like me and Weasel Dooley and Kenny had already seen the Japanese matches. So then we get the tape of the Madison Square Garden match. And they had to gear it back about 50% just to, you know, I'm sure that there was some things they just knew, well, we can't do here. So it was kind of a letdown if you'd seen their previous matches. But for those people, it's the environment. For those people, they'd never seen anything like that shit. But and once again, they didn't see anything like that shit on a regular basis because, you know, once again, too much salt can spoil the soup, whatever. If you like seasonings, it's still too much. But it not only is it he an amazing performer, it was a groundbreaking style change for a lot of people, but he went too far, as we'll talk about later with Mr. Arquette and just the whole genre and this generation of things. And he was pretty much out of the business. He started early. He was 15. That's why he was the Dynamite Kid, right? But he was out of the business and done by the time he was 30.
You know, there were two guys I remember when I was a young fan you would hear about, Dynamite Kid and Mick Foley, the guys that people would say, oh, they're going to be in a wheelchair. And Dynamite was already getting close to that point then, like in the early 90s. And he ended up in a wheelchair. He ended up being the physical mess that a lot of people thought he would be. Not all of it due directly to the bumps. Obviously, there were other issues at play. But like I said earlier, he's a cautionary tale, I think, for wrestling.
But I'll tell you what, there was a guy also that it wasn't about the moves. And see, this is the thing with Cactus. It wasn't about just the moves. That's how he got noticed, because he was such an unlikely personality in his own way. Cactus had a shitty looking body and was a hippie looking guy. And behind all that was an incredible athlete. Is not a traditional one, but also an incredible intellect and a personality. He used the bumps to get noticed because he had the handicaps of being so unlikely. But once all that other stuff came into play, that's when he started needing the bumps less and less. And we'll debate later whether he, cut them off at the right time or not. But a guy like Dynamite, other people tried to imitate the bumps. But look at his intensity. Look at the personality. He really was a fucking miserable, sociopathic badass. And he was tough enough to take a fucking arrow in the chest and keep coming. He projected that he was the badass fucking, guy from a poor neighborhood in fucking England. So he could unleash that physically in the ring as well as the moves. It looked like the guy was legitimate. Other people just doing the fucking moves. They're just doing the moves and crippling themselves. And he, and if this guy couldn't stand up under it, because to look at him in his prime and see the aura that he gave off of being invincible physically, if he couldn't take it, why does this fucking guy that's got a part-time job at the Office Depot, over at Stony Brook or whatever, and then he wrestles on the weekends, but he's going to be the second coming, the Dynamite Kid, and possibly end up in the same place. Anyway.
Hey, can I ask you, though, we're talking so much about him as a wrestler. We haven't really talked about him as a tag team wrestler. You obviously are a tag team expert. How much did you get to see the Bulldogs in Japan and then later in the WWF? And was it ever something you fantasized about, the Midnight Express versus the British Bulldogs?
Well, yeah, when we, first of all, yes, I had seen, because I got all the Japanese tapes and still have them in the vault. Both Baba and Inoki show for starting in, from Walt Wolanski primarily for like 15 or 12 to 15 years, but starting in like 81-ish. So I have everything. And yeah, and I didn't like their surprise here. I didn't like their WWF work as much as their Japanese stuff because they had to gain so much weight by the time that they got to the WWF that it slowed them down doing some of the things that they had done. But yeah, when we first talked to Vince McMahon and considered going to the WWF in '86, they were basically the team. Them and the Hart Foundation were the two teams at that point that I would have liked the Midnight to get in the ring with. Whereas we had about 4, 5, or 6 in Crockett. That's why we decided to stay there.
Did Davey Boy ever talk about him to you?
Not that much. I mean, he'd be referred to every once in a while of, a move or a story or whatever, just in passing. But I don't know how they were during that period because they were sometimes in and sometimes out. And I don't know what period that was. But anyway, yeah, once again, an incredible performer, but it just because you can do things, and we'll move on, just because you can do things doesn't mean you should. And if you have real talent, if you have to use a few wild things as an attention getter, fine. But if you get attention and all you have is the stunts and the wild things, then you're pretty much doomed and you have a very short career. You need to be have an attention getter and have something else to offer besides that, or you're just killing yourself. And then you're making it harder for the guys that do have the other things to get noticed because the bar is so much higher for doing fucking stunts. Yike.
Yeah. He took a lot of unnecessary, but I remember WrestleMania 2, the Dream Team versus the British Bulldogs with Lou Albano and Ozzy Osbourne in the Bulldogs corner. And he takes a headbutt. The finish of the match is they ram the head into Dynamite, who's on the apron.
Old sacrifice.
And he goes flying into the fucking crowd. He just goes flying off camera. Like an unnecessary bump he did not need to take. And, he did.
That's what broke his back and fucked him up and was the beginning of the end, wasn't it? That bump.
Well, the injury, there actually is footage of the match. I believe it's them, the Bulldogs against Morocco and Orton in Canada. And it was something simple. He ran to the ropes and his back just gave out completely. And obviously it was bumps like that and headbutts to the floor off the top rope.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is that it wasn't, that bump itself wasn't the end of it, but that was what fucked his back up and led to him, and then they had to carry him out to the ring practically and have a gimmick tag match where he never got in for them to lose the belts.
Yeah, Davey Boy pretty much carried him on his back, literally, to the ring, and then they attacked him, and that was the match.
Hey, it was simpler times back then. Anyway.
Almost as disappointing as the Midnight Express losing to the Road Warriors in New Orleans.
Oh, that was I thought, all in all, quite a nicely done double turn that evening.
It is impossible to watch that and not genuinely feel bad for you and the Express, despite the fact you guys were the worst heels for so long. You watch that and you feel your panic and your sadness, and you actually feel for you. I do, at least.
Well, and then also, and no matter what we'd done to the Road Warriors, they managed to act like pricks over and above that. They were getting more than even, right? It was too much. Stop it. Let's get Eddie Marlin in here. But yeah, that was one of my favorite things also, because if we had to lose the World Tag title 6 weeks after we won it, because we did have to lose it because that was not planned for us to win it and Dusty had other ideas, that was the way to do it rather than just get beat in a match. And it also, since we knew that obviously that at the next TBS TV was when Heyman and the original Midnight were going to come in and do the angle, then Dusty had us do it that way so we would get some sympathy and they'd be more likely to want to like us when we just get our brains bashed out by these interlopers. And he also knew that the Midnight were probably the best team to get some heat on the Road Warriors, who were the most popular team in the territory.
Was Midnight versus Midnight originally supposed to be a U.S. tag title feud?
No. We didn't even talk about that because, and see, that was, we kind of got jobbed out of those belts because when we won the World Tag title from Tully and Arn, we had to give up the U.S. Tag titles so they'd have other champions. So they put them up in the tournament or whatever they did. And then 6 weeks later, we have to drop the World Tag title. I'm like, well, motherfucker. So actually it cost us in the long run the U.S. because it would have been, because we would have still had them, but by that time, it wasn't, the belts weren't talked about. And then, of course, obviously, TBS came in, fucked the whole thing up. They could fuck up an anvil. But what?
I never heard that expression before.
Well, if you can fuck up an anvil, you're a goddamn good fucker-upper, aren't you?
I would assume so, yeah.
Yeah, you're very qualified at it. Anyway, I mentioned I was physically burnt also. So while you've had the plague up there, the germs that are going around in Jersey, I've been busy down here of fulfilling the obligations and responsibilities of a man running a media and merchandising empire such as myself. My retirement is not going as planned. I thought I was going to be able to sit around on my big fat ass, but I've suddenly made an industry. And I know the Kenny Omega fan types think that I'm sitting around all day wanting somebody to talk about me and shaking my fist at the cloud thing, but I wish I had time for some cloud fist shaking. And now the whole year has gone by, and and it's wintertime outside, and I can't sit under my dogwood tree in my chair and contemplate my front yard anymore. But I didn't have time to do that for the past 3 months anyway. I've been so busy. But this week has been particularly hectic. We got a lot of things going on. People have been subscribing to the YouTube channel. Just in the last week, right?
Yeah.
I was at Louisville SuperCon. Of course, Thursday I had to get all the orders out, shipped everything at the post office. Susie says, hey, and got everything packed up. And Friday, Saturday, and Sunday was SuperCon here in Louisville were great, but it was 12+ hour days, even not being in town. Going down there by the time you go down and get back. But it was good to see. I saw Kane, Glenn Jacobs for the first time in ages. And it was good to see him. We took a picture. And I tweeted, I said, anybody for a Cornette Jacobs 2020 ticket or whatever. And it got the, 2,000 little Hardy things or whatever. But somebody was like, well, he's a libertarian. I wasn't really serious about running anyway, motherfucker. I was just catching up with an old friend, for heaven's sake.
And what's wrong with reaching across the party line?
Yes, what's wrong with reaching across the aisle?
Yeah.
But that was nice. There was just a bunch of Booker T. Mark Henry back here in Louisville. He's very popular in Louisville. He lived here for quite a while with OVW. So saw a bunch of the guys, not only the King, Jerry, finally gave him that Lego belt. Good Lord, I should have charged him FedEx rates. But also a bunch of the Cult of Cornette members, and Travis Bickle was down there with his son Aiden.
Travis Heckle.
That's what I said. And so many of the Cult of Cornette members from around the Kentuckiana area, so I appreciate that. But that was a long weekend, right? Well, then I come back, and of course, Monday morning, I got to unpack everything, and the orders to Cornette's Collectibles at jimcornette.com have obviously flooded in over the weekend, about 100 of them, which I immediately get started processing because I want to get the value out to the Cornette's Collectibles customers, and I finish about midnight, along with doing things like Chicago. Hello. I've also finalized on Monday the deal for C2E2, the Chicago Comic and Entertainment Expo in Chicago in March. Not only will I be there for the entire show with Cornette's Collectibles booth, but also we're going to do a cool VIP evening thing. It's not just going to be an hour and a half Q&A or whatever. We'll spend the evening Q&A, photo ops, food, bullshit session. More to be announced soon, but that's going to be in Chicago in March at C2E2, my first time there. I was ordering some more merchandise because books have been ordered again. Amazon is taking a little bit longer to print than CreateSpace was. The giants of industry held me up a little bit there. But anyway, we're restocking all the Cult of Cornette merchandise at Cornette's Collectibles because God knows we have had wonderful feedback, and I appreciate this on the sale, but it's keeping me on my toes. And if you want action figures, if we've had a run on action figures, get your order in. I'm restocking, but get your order in to avoid being left out before the holidays. So I do all that stuff on Monday, right? Then Tuesday, get up, boom, go to the post office. Susie ships all that stuff off, tells me no post office on Wednesday because of Bush Senior's memorial. So we're losing a day there also. So that's another reason to get your orders in before Christmas. But anyway, ship everything on Tuesday and then come back. My Fighting Spirit magazine column is due. My monthly column for Fighting Spirit magazine. Check it out online at jimcornette.com. You can read past columns or subscribe to the damn magazine. It's the finest pro wrestling and MMA newsstand publication, also available online in the United Kingdom. But that takes me most of the day because I write that column and I put a lot of work and effort in that like I do everything I do. So then today is Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen, where we are recording 2 shows to make sure that we don't deprive the people of a drive-through again. I'm also fielding calls about the Midnight Express 35th anniversary tour, which begins this weekend, December 8th and 9th in Nashville at the Nashville Comic Con. Fine folks at Comic City, Tennessee are putting on their 20th Comic Con, and it's our 35th anniversary, and I'll be there with Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey. Just a quick plug. We're going to be doing photo ops, autographed 8x10s. I'll have a full line of merchandise Saturday and Sunday. And it's Dennis's first appearance, as we've mentioned, since he kicked cancer's ass, and we'd like everybody to come out and say hello. I think Randy Hales is coming, and hopefully he will bring Eddie Marlin with him. We're not sure, but Eddie loves Dennis.
Anyway, and a calculator.
And a calculator. And an IT tech Randy can bring with him.
Well, it took him 2 minutes last week. We found out something really interesting. If you put a little pressure on Randy Hales, eventually he'll blame Bo James.
He's new at this. He's new at this. But true. Anyway, so and order those Power Pro DVDs, folks. Keep Randy busy for the holidays. But anyway, so I've been fielding calls for the midnight, but that's the first one this weekend in Nashville. But we will now be doing West Virginia in April, Richmond, Virginia in May, and we're also going to do a Jim Cornette VIP experience in Richmond in May. We're going to be doing the Fanboy Expo in Knoxville, the biggest comic convention in East Tennessee, in July. We're going to be doing the Gathering, the New Charlotte reunion in August in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we're keeping up with calls to those promoters and things. Once we finish recording today, I will be processing more incoming at jimcornette.com to get that stuff out to the folks before I leave for Nashville this week. And also I've been reviewing art for Behind the Curtain. Jim Cornette presents True Pro Wrestling Stories from IDW Comics. Dennis Medry is whizzing away working on that stuff. As we've mentioned, the scripts are done. My part is done. Brandon Easton's part is done. The Kickstarter was tremendously successful. I still have some people to contact, and it will be forthcoming. The Kickstarter editions are going to be hardcovers. We doubled the size of the book with the tremendous response to the Kickstarter. And the artwork is somewhere in the neighborhood of a third to a halfway done, I believe, at this point. But then we've got to go through revisions. It's going to be so true to the time periods they're using reference photos to work off of not only all the guys, but of the time periods and the places. Some cool shit in there. So we're still working on that. Everybody stay tuned. And after I get back from Nashville, we'll be doing a lot of this over again, because we'll record more next week and also continue filling orders. And there's some other projects that I have for next year that I have to address now. So for the people who think, oh, I email him and he doesn't answer me right away, or boy, I can't get Cornette on the phone. I'm sorry. I can pop the corn too, as I said to Joe Koff one time. But I'm a lot busier than I thought I was going to be at this stage of my life.
I expected a book a year from you.
And that's the thing. I want to do these books, but I don't like to just dribble and drab do so. I like to sit down for a week or two or three, which a couple times in the past when I've taken a year off or whatever, that's actually when I've usually gotten books done. And I appreciate it. And once again, there's people digging ditches. It's a great problem to have. But, the evolution of Cornette's Collectibles was starting in 2009. The only reason I started JimCornette.com, honestly, was because I did the Midnight Express 25th anniversary scrapbook that year and started the website to have a place for people to be able to order the book. And that's what it was for, a couple of years, book and a couple of videos that we did. And then, then I was concentrating on Ring of Honor for a couple of years there and really didn't do anything with the site. But since 2013, we've not only expanded, obviously, my products, but have found other classic wrestling memorabilia and things like the warehouse find of the wrestling goals and stuff, be able to bring people that genre. And it's gone from, the site I put up to sell the book to a six-figure a year enterprise. And I appreciate that for everybody, I do the labels. I do the labels because I'm anal like that. So I'm recognizing so many of the Cult of Cornette's names and their addresses. I know where many of you live. Just remember that when you go to sleep tonight. So it's like it's a community, as you used that word one time about the Arcadian Vanguard family over there. It's a community. So I appreciate it. That's one of the reasons why, between recording and filling those commitments, and I have limited my live appearances, not only because, as I said, traveling wears on me, but because it generally puts me behind with other things I have to do or projects I've got going on, and including the books. And in 2019, I'm going to try, I always say this, to limit myself to one appearance per month, which takes up usually a weekend. And I've already got February, March, April, May, July, and August. So it's 2019's filling up fast. But I appreciate everybody. It's keeping me busy, but I'm having fun. And you know what it's like to be busy. You do 18 shows a goddamn week, don't you? I
do a lot. On a given week, I probably have my hands in at least 10 shows.
That's an odd way of saying it.
I have my hands all over at least 10 shows, I would say.
You've barely touched your food. I could see if you said I've had taken part in or worked on or produced or, whatever, but my hands in. What you're saying is you have your fingers in a couple of things that we don't know about.
No, everyone knows all about them. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. There are a few surprises coming. But other than that, it's the usual suspects.
Well, what's going on this week? You might as well talk about it now, since I've been droning on about my business.
Well, let me tell you one thing I thought was really good, and I had a great time listening to this. Scott Bowden on Kentucky Fried Wrestling this week at KFRpod.com or anywhere on iTunes for anyone who wants to find it. Ken Parnell. And I'd never heard him do a long interview before, and it was fascinating. Really, really great stuff. So I got to ask you, what do you remember about Ken when you first met him, and any good stories?
Well, it's hard to have good stories about Ken because I would see him on Monday nights because he lived in Memphis. He was, I think, didn't he work at Channel 5?
Yeah, he actually worked at both Channel 5 and for Jerry Jarrett.
Well, yeah, but that's how because he worked with Channel 5 and was a great, cameraman and could work with the E&G packages on the fly there to basically set up. They started doing a 2-camera shot. So Jarrett hired Ken to do the Monday night shows in Memphis, where instead of just having the hard camera in the stands, Ken would do the floor camera, and they could edit it together. And all of a sudden, the Tupelo show went from and Jackson show went from a 1-camera show to a 2-camera show. And Ken was always there shooting, and then he would shoot a lot of the video for the music videos and things and such, carrying on. Yeah. So,
and he also got stabbed by Michael Hayes. So that's another great story.
Well, I was going to ask you. Well, off the air, so it doesn't spoil your show. But yes, Michael Hayes did stab him. That was after I'd already left. I never stabbed him, but he was shooting my favorite piece of floor camera video one night when I nearly got killed. But anyway, so Ken was there on Monday nights. He'd shoot the matches in Memphis, and then he wouldn't go to the rest of the territory because he worked at Channel 5. But that's why the Memphis matches are usually the best quality from the territory that you find at that time. But anyway, he's the one that was shooting the match with me and Jimmy Hart in a handicap match against Bobby Eaton.
Yeah, I remember that one very well.
And the deal was, and I'm sorry if I'm duplicating stories, but I found out we have a bunch of new listeners, so bear with me for a second. Bobby Eaton's a baby face. He's turned and broken away from Jimmy Hart's first family. I am, of course, Jimmy's flunky, so me and him versus Bobby Eaton. And the stipulation is that if Bobby can't beat us, and we've, by the way, never won a handicap match, me and Jimmy Hart together, never won, and people know this. If Bobby can't beat us, then he's going to throw $1,000 in cash to the crowd in the Coliseum. And what Lawler did was he sent somebody up to the box office. His mother worked at the box office at the Coliseum, Hazel, and got like $125 in $1 bills and took them each individually and crumpled them up and put them in this box. It looked like a giant fucking box of money, right? And because that night, for the first time ever in history, me and Jimmy Hart were going to win a handicap match and defeat our opponent. And I've got the tape of it, and Ken's shooting ringside. And basically, as you would think, for the first couple minutes, we either run from Bobby, and finally he grabs us, and he's just punching. He's just beating the shit out of both of us, just one and then the other. Boom, boom, boom. And Bobby's punches are great. I can't work at all. I've had no lessons. I've had, 20 matches on spot shows and, in front of people. But all I got to do is get beat up, right? So I still kind of look better than Jimmy. I always thought I was a more natural worker than Jimmy Hart, which is like being the nicest guy in prison. But anyway, so Bobby's beating us up as per expected, but then suddenly something happens where we're able to distract the referee and Roger Smith, the assassin. We've had him on the program here in the past. He's a wild man. Here he comes out, the assassin. He puts his loaded mask gimmick in his mask and he headbutts Bobby and knocks him goofy. And he jumps down. The referee don't see it. And I believe I've got the referee, and Jimmy tops Bobby, and the referee turns around 1, 2, 3, and we've won the match. And the people are pissed. They don't get the fucking money, right? But nevertheless, we dilly-dally too long, Brian, in the ring. And you know what happens when heel managers dilly-dally, right?
Yeah, Lawler loses money.
Yeah, well, eventually. We dilly-dallied until Bobby got up, and he caught us. And because I've got the box of money and Jimmy's applauding and there's Roger's got in the ring now. Well, Bobby turns around and nails fucking the assassin and nails Jimmy. And I've got the box of money and I hold it out to him like, here, take it. Don't hit me. And he fucking does take it and hits me anyway. Right. And Lawler had told us, he said, okay, so once you've got the box, Bobby, just take a handful and go over the ropes and throw out a handful and maybe one more, right? Maybe 2. And then Roger will come back and he'll stop you from behind and y'all get some heat on Bobby. He said, don't throw more than 2 handfuls of money out, right? Okay. So Bobby's got this box and he goes over to one side and he grabs a handful and he throws that one handful out over the top rope. And it was a ways between the front row in Memphis for obvious reasons and the ring, right? It was probably about 10 feet. You had room to fight outside the ring and everything. And also you didn't have to worry about getting punched in the back of the head usually. But when Bobby throws this one handful of cash that people think it might be hundreds or, $100 bills, whatever, they don't fucking know. I'm laying there in the ring selling, and I start to see, what the fuck? There's people surging forward. And so me and Jimmy have both, Jimmy's over on one side and I'm behind me. Roger's picking me up. So I'm with Roger. And Bobby reaches down and he throws that second handful. And when he does, Roger's seeing the same thing. At first, the surge was every small African-American child in the Mid-South Coliseum under the age of 10. The second surge was every male human being in the Mid-South Coliseum under the age of 15. By the time that Bobby had thrown that fucking second handful and reached down for a third, I couldn't see him anymore. They started piling into the ring. What the fuck? It was like being covered up by like an invasion of marauding giant ants from Mars or whatever. They just swarmed over, and they came from every side. And as they're starting to pour through the ropes, I look and there's Jimmy stand up. I'm like, Jimmy, because I'm behind Roger Smith, right? And he ain't moving. He ain't going to stop Bobby. There's no way. There's too many people in the ring, because now the third wave is it seemed like every male under the age of 25. It just, the little kids were quicker. As these people start pouring in the ring, I'm, Jimmy, come over here, because I'm thinking they're going to get Jimmy. That's the last thing I remember. They did get Jimmy Cornette. Somehow, somebody on the way by me from behind, because they were coming from all sides now, Ken Parnell, if you ask him, he may remember, because he's the only one that admitted seeing this. Somebody came and clocked me, right? But when I remember all those people pouring in the ring and screaming for Jimmy. And then the next thing I remember, I'm sitting on my ass in the ring with Roger and Jimmy both over me, and the ring is empty. Bobby Eaton's gone. The people, the box is gone. The people are gone. Everything's gone. And I'm like, what the fuck? They said, you must have fainted. Fainted? What the fuck? Why is my fucking jaw hurt? What happened? Ken Parnell's the only one who ever admitted to seeing. He said, yeah, a guy reached out and just blasted you right in the side of the fucking head. And so I missed what happened next. But basically, after I was rendered unconscious, those people, once again, Bobby just stood there with his arms up frozen. He let them have it all. He wasn't going to fight him, right? They took every dollar bill. They took the box. It was like the fucking Grinch that stole Christmas. That ring was clean. I think they cleaned the canvas. By the time I woke up, it was cleaner than when I'd fallen on it. And you see, and the best part is Ken's camera, the floor camera. I got the video from him later on because I had to have it. I wanted to see what happened, right? And here's where the floor camera, suddenly you see Bobby throw the first handful, and about a second later, the camera starts to shake, and you see elbows and feet and the rope shaking and people coming, and then all of a sudden, the second handful, here come the fucking people, and the camera goes sideways down to the floor, and they climbed over Ken to get and knocked him down sideways, and he took the camera and bundled it up under his fucking stomach and made off with it so that they wouldn't steal it or wreck it too.
I always like the part where they go back to the studio afterwards, or not even a studio, but Lance, and he's just like, well, never get in the ring, friends.
Yeah. Because that match aired on the Tupelo, Mississippi and Jackson, Tennessee programs, which they did from the Mid-South Coliseum, because those cities got regular matches, but they also got the Channel 5 show from Memphis because that was such a strong signal. So they had local TV stations in those markets, and Jarrett did the B show for those markets to put local promos on for northern Mississippi and for middle Tennessee. And at one point, I think it may have aired over in somewhere in Missouri also. But yeah, so they actually got the preliminary, and in some cases, a lot of the main event matches from the Mid-South Coliseum on their local TV stations for fucking years. And it was Lance standing in front of a black curtain that they would put up in one of the locker rooms in the Mid-South Coliseum, and we'd shoot it on Monday nights along with the local promos for all the towns. They'd write out a format for Jackson and for Tupelo with what matches they were going to stick in later, and Lance would do a stand-up intro and an outro. And that was the TV show. They did it for literally Randy West's time in editing it. and no extra expense, and of course to pay Ken and Randy to shoot it on Mondays.
So that's on KFR this week. And, I want to mention to you also, this week, Bowdrin and Barry, Jeff Bowdrin, I should use his real name, and Barry Rose, I should use his name too, Breaking Kayfabe, they do an episode on unsolved mysteries, not necessarily ones that everyone talks about, some interesting ones, and one of them is the death of Corsica Jean. Do you know much about Corsica Jean?
No, as a matter of fact, I would like to know more about, because obviously Corsica Joe was a fixture at the matches in Nashville for years and years after he retired. He was married to Sarah Lee, who was a famous women's wrestler in the South in the days gone by. But and the Corsican brothers were one of the hottest tag teams that ever came to Tennessee, and they were a team for years in the 50s all over the country. But during the hottest period in the 50s, in 1957, when the Fargos came in, the Fargos or the Corsican brothers or the Fargos against the Corsican brothers headlined like 20 sellouts straight in one period in 1957 at the Hippodrome in Nashville. So they were huge in the day. But I don't know about the Corsica Jean situation.
He later on retired to Florida and opened a bar with his wife, and later on he was murdered. So it's a story that they still have never found the guy who murdered him. So that's what they talk about. You can get that at bowdrinpod.com or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And I got to mention, Jim, the 605 Superpodcast, the mothership, and...
I was even going to take one from you this week just because I feel bad for you. I knew you didn't have a ton of power, and I didn't want my sonic block to override your voice.
You were going to take one. I don't have one to give. But this week on the mothership, the long-awaited anniversary show, I apologize for the
mothership!
I apologize for the long delays between losing electricity and then catching this form of, obviously, the plague. I have had a rough time, but I can honestly say it may be the single greatest episode I've ever produced. You get to hear Polish Joe Chupik.
You're still fucking humble, I see.
I'm the best at this. Fumi Saito on Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki, the most amazing Pandemonium Theater, In the News with Jim Cornette, the top 10, and a lot of bonus stuff. Once again, at 605pod.com or available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcast. I'll try one. The Mothership!
God damn it!
It's not natural. I can't do it because my throat's all messed up.
Yeah, you got it by me, though, at least.
And thank you to everyone who's been buying T-shirts for the holiday season. I appreciate it.
Boy, I'll tell you, I'm surprised that anybody I see on the street is wearing anything other than a Jim Cornette T-shirt with the amount of T-shirts we've been selling. For heaven's sake. And I appreciate it, ladies and gentlemen, but also you're keeping me hopping. I'm trying to keep all this stuff stocked.
Well, the best was the other day I spoke to you, and you were very happy for the first time in a while. And I said, what's going on? You're like, my order just came in. I finally got restocked. I'm good. And then the next day, 2 days later, I spoke to you.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's all gone. It's all gone.
And the books, if you've ordered a Tuesday Night at the Gardens, ladies and gentlemen, we had a run on those, and we've reordered, and we're going to try to get them any day now. But Amazon has taken over from Creative Space, and it took longer on an order. But then on the second order we made, that is allegedly supposed to be here in a couple of days. So I don't know with these people, but yeah, I'm buying everything in sight. And also we had a run on our new YouTube channel, which actually has something on it now. Imagine that. We explained to everyone that we had started a new official YouTube channel to go to and subscribe, please, so that you would be in on the journey with us. And over 5,000 people did, when the only thing on it was the video welcoming them to the YouTube channel. So we appreciate that. But now stuff is starting to go up. Recent episodes of The Drive-Thru and The Experience, if you've missed those, or for more convenience, because I understand from a lot of people I talked to at SuperCon, some people, it's easier for them to listen on YouTube. So we're going to be doing that. And then we're going to start reaching into the back catalog. We also have some exclusive stuff. But as I believe we've both mentioned on this program, where we've been commiserating with each other, time is at a premium. So we're doing this, but if you want to subscribe and get in on the ground floor, because we're taking another big run at this, folks, to see if YouTube will cooperate with us this time on getting these things straightened out. It's official Jim Cornette. Is that correct? They can add it to their repertoires.
It's the official Jim Cornette channel. If you want to get there in an easy way, tinyurl.com/officialcornyyoutube. And like Jim just said, recent episodes have gone up. Every current episode, when it goes up, will now be going up on YouTube. And I want to thank the Arcadian Vanguard art director, Travis Heckel, who's now doing exclusive artwork for each episode on YouTube. And I encourage you to check that out. Some funny stuff. If you want to see Jim in compromising positions, check that out at tinyurl.com/officialcornyyoutube.
Hey, anytime I get in a compromising position, it's artsy. It doesn't violate any of the community standards, for heaven's sake.
He did one of you on the toilet reading the Observer and someone trying to get your autograph, and I laughed for like 10 minutes at that one.
Well, that's I've read the Observer on the toilet, and I've had people try to get my autograph while I was on the toilet, but I don't know that I've ever read the Observer on the toilet while somebody was trying to get my autograph.
My favorite Observer coming up in conversation story is Dennis Carluzzo's funeral. The priest was giving a speech, and he knew Dennis. He knew Dennis well. And he was talking about Dennis's personality, how funny he was, and said that you'd all be surprised, but I used to see him with his family in here on Sundays for church. And I was always so taken with how dedicated Dennis was to reading his Bible. He seemed more into it than everyone there. And then one day I got behind him and I noticed he was reading something called the Wrestling Observer newsletter, which he held in his Bible in church on Sunday. So my favorite Observer story in conversation.
Oh, anyway, shifting gears completely. You know, I'm feeling charitable. Should I say I'm sorry to poor old David Arquette for hurting his feelings?
You really did hurt his feelings. Seemingly.
Apparently I did, because he tweeted, of course, he didn't tag me, as the kids say on Twitter. He hashtagged me, like hashtag Jim Cornette. But he said something to the effect of, Jim Cornette, he listened to the show where I reviewed his efforts in the squared circle in the death match with the convicted felonious bank robber. And he said Cornette has some good points, missed some other ones, but you know, you don't have to be an asshole about it. I was an asshole about it. And he, I guess, took exception to that. And of course, then I probably didn't make any better. I tweeted back and said, hey, I'd rather be a live asshole than a dead moron. Because I had mentioned to him to begin with, after he expressed these issues he had with my critique of his performance, do I go to Hollywood and make shitty movies and embarrass your profession, David Arquette, like you do mine when you get in a garbage match, which anybody, B-movie actor or professional wrestling, gets in one of these garbage death matches, is embarrassing the profession, but especially a fucking middle-aged or almost 50-year-old, that's past middle, unless he's going to live to be 94. He almost didn't live to be fucking 15 minutes older after they stabbed him in the neck. A middle-aged fucking, I guess, was he a comedian or did he have any dramatic roles in the movie? I saw Scream.
Yeah, I was going to say, to be fair, he made shitty movies too.
Okay, well, but see, then if that's his thing to make shitty movies, that's his thing. But the point is, I didn't go to Hollywood and make shitty movies and embarrass his profession. Why is he doing mine? People crucified on both sides, in wrestling and in the MMA world, crucified CM Punk when he decided he was going to transition to the UFC. And Punk was way more qualified to fight mixed martial arts than David Arquette is to be a professional wrestler. What's the difference in that? Punk was younger, was willing to put in 2 years of serious training, and had a name that would draw millions of pay-per-view buys, and he didn't embarrass himself, but he sure didn't win. But people were, but now David Arquette should be allowed to live his dream. He's putting the work in. It doesn't matter. He's a fucking near 50-year-old comedian. It's perception that anybody can do this shit. Shane McMahon. And as I've mentioned, Shane may be my favorite McMahon. I've always liked him. I had a nice talk with him at WrestleMania, the Hall of Fame thing last year. He's a fucking hoss. He's in shape. He's fearless. He's a pretty fucking strong young man and probably take care of himself very well. But he shouldn't be portrayed on television, I've always said, as beating up pro wrestlers and being competitive with pro wrestlers, whether he could be or not. In the real world, he could probably kick the shit out of The Miz. But he's been portrayed, people's perception of him is as the son of a billionaire, and has been, in a lot of cases, a heel character. And so he shouldn't be fighting, I've said this before, even though I like Shane, fighting wrestlers on a competitive equal basis. Of near 50-year-old comedian, whether he wants to train or not, should not be fighting professional wrestlers, shouldn't be in death matches, period, as we'll get to in a minute, and shouldn't be fighting professional wrestlers competitively, whether good God. You ought to get Rip Rogers' input on this. Just because you can do things doesn't mean you should be allowed to. As I've said, just because I know all the words to his songs doesn't mean I can sing like Elvis Presley. If my dream was to play center for the Boston Celtics, should I be allowed to? Or should I continue to be a big basketball fan? With Rip, he's one of the very few people that when he was a fan of things, he was able to get in and do them at a high level. He had one professional boxing match, and he won it. He won several bodybuilding contests. He didn't get in mixed martial arts, and he's found his niche as he would say, phony pro wrestler. But he didn't embarrass himself by going into goddamn starring on Broadway in a musical. He knew his areas of expertise. This is not one. It devalues the business. When I say if somebody so-and-so or such exposes the business, I'm so sick of these people who think that that means the difference in telling somebody whether it's a work or not. I'm playing chess here, folks, not checkers. Exposes the business means a variety of things. When a fucking middle-aged comedian or a fucking reality show TV star woman or whatever does sometimes even good-looking wrestling moves in a wrestling ring, it exposes the business as planting the notion in people's mind that this shit's easier to do than it is and easier to do than they should think it is. If anybody can fucking do it, it loses its speciality, its impressions that you make on people. Exposes the business when a middle-aged comedian is competitive in a match with a professional wrestler. They may already know it's a work, but it exposes the business as being easier than they should think that it is. A lot of bumps in wrestling look like they'd fucking kill you, and they don't really hurt at all. And a lot of bumps hurt like fuck. And who is it to tell the difference if from somebody who's never been in a ring except how we portray it? If you have this Marco stunt, and once again, I don't have anything against the kid. His Major League Wrestling career lasted 2.5 months. If you have a guy on your show that's 5'3" and 130 pounds, it's the reason for it is because he does a bunch of insane fucking flying hoop-de-doo moves. That's the reason why you would book a 5'3", 130 pound fucking professional wrestler that's 20 years old or whatever. And that's inviting somebody not only to fuck themselves up because that's what he's known for, that's what he's going to keep doing, but also that exposes the business that if this guy that looks like the average person in the crowd could pick their fucking teeth with him can survive being thrown across the ring and slammed on his head and on his back and outside on the floor and blah, 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 and just continue to do all this shit, then that wrestling shit's faker than I thought it was. Why, none of those bumps hurt. When actually, if you're a full-grown human being, and much of the time, even if you're not, those bumps hurt. And not everybody should be able to do it. And you're exposing the business by showing people that it is somewhat easy to do those moves for a while before you paralyze yourself. And the death matches expose the business when also the gap in logic is amazing that a deathmatch crowd would probably be the 150 people in that particular fucking town that know more than anybody else that everything about wrestling is fucking phony. And here these guys are really carving each other up and needing stitches and fucking breaking their necks to have a fake match in front of people who know it's a fake match, but they're really cooperating to hurt each other. That's why my fucking head explodes. But that stuff exposes the business to people in a negative light. It exposes the business as being professional wrestling is full of freak show fucking geeks. The guy that bites the chicken off the fucking, or the head off the live chicken in the sideshow, the lowest of the low, the septic tank dwellers. That's what professional wrestling is, and that's what other people are that it appeals to, the fans of this thing, because they're cheering people bleeding and being cut and ripped to shreds and going through doors and light tubes and tables and barbed wire and weed whackers and somebody taking battery acid and putting it in a turkey baster and shoving it up a guy's ass until it comes out his nose mixed with the foamy blood where his intestinal organs have been turned to fucking mush like a super Ebola enema in the third match. That exposes the business in a negative light to people who may then never want to see any more fucking wrestling because that's just stupid. And then the point of the whole conversation that has been being had over the last, I don't know how long is, well, their Marco Stunt broke his leg, and David Arquette almost got his throat cut, and that Joey Janela, the guy that worked with the Invisible Man, it was nice enough to take a shit on the whole business doing that. He blew his fucking knee out. And I'm going to, as a matter of fact, I've just written this article for Fighting Spirit. I've had knee injuries, and I've talked to a lot of doctors and a lot of people that I've booked and trained and been responsible for in my promotions that have had knee injuries. And it helps in wrestling to recover from knee injuries when you're a pretty elite level athlete to begin with, and you can afford the best orthopedic surgeons and physical therapy follow-up, and I would assume that an independent wrestler is probably not in either one of those positions. So he's going to have to modify his shit when he comes back, if he comes back. And if he does, then if all somebody is known for is doing goofy stunts and having stupid matches and popping up from shit that they ought to sell to go viral or being thrown off the roof or whatever the fuck, if that's all you're known for, as we mentioned when we talked about Dynamite Kid, you're shit out of luck, pal. So I don't know why people set this standard for themselves, and all it does not only is set a standard for them, but then it makes it harder for guys with real talent to get over because they have to go further because of these numbnutses. And these fucking promoters that would fly a 20-year-old kid around the fucking country, 120 pounds, put him on a fucking show, sooner or later he's going to break something, which he did. Or these fucking idiot promoters that run these goddamn death matches, which nobody wants to sponsor in town. No television station wants to air it. No reputable companies want to be involved with a wrestling promotion that's wrapping people up in barbed wire and shedding all that fucking blood all over the place and all the mercury gas out of the fluorescent light tubes. Nobody wants to be involved with that except the 200 people that the Ian Rottens or the Combat Zone Wrestlings or whatever the fucking world can put in a goddamn barn somewhere. And so there's no way to expand these promotions and make them bigger, like a Ring of Honor or like a fucking New Japan or like a goddamn, especially a WWE. But if it's a mark out thing for these fucking goofs that run shows like this. Generally, the head guy is the guy that wants to be the champion, put the hardcore belt on him, see all my scars. They can't go anywhere financially because that's such a limited niche, so they do it for the fuck of it because somehow it proves that they're hardcore and tough when they're cooperating with another person to rip each other up for real in front of people that know that it's a work. And you can't have people, reputably trained people on these shows because there are no reputable trainers in professional wrestling that train people to do death matches. The goofs that do it just make the shit up as they go along. Do you want somebody with broken glass and fucking barbed wire and goddamn blunt instruments making some shit up as they go along in a match with you? This whole thing is stupid, and it exposes the business not only because of the perception, not only because of the idea that everybody can do it, not only because of the fucking taste factor and the bar that it sets for real pros who have to get by with doing less moves and taking less bumps so they can have something called a career, and who have to concentrate on the competition aspect of the thing and the personality aspect. Can I make the fans believe that I'm somewhat legitimate and that what I'm doing here is somewhat legitimate? Those are the people that make the money. And these other people make it harder and harder for those people to do their job. So David Arquette, if he was so in love with wrestling, if he's an actor, I've never met him, but apparently he should be fairly glib. Did he give thought to becoming a manager, where then he might get some publicity for a promotion or a team or a wrestler? And he might be able to then train and be able to take a few bumps. I had manager matches where I was never presented as competitive to the fucking equal, to the professional wrestler or his equal, but the object was see me get my ass kicked. He's proven that David Arquette has proven that he can take a classic ass whipping. So why wouldn't he become a manager where he could use his glibness and his acting ability to get the athletes over and then take a few bumps? But he's got to go to a fucking fantasy camp for goddamn, and then these promoters, just like they're marks to book these fucking kids to fly them around across the country when they don't know what they're fucking doing, just to let them kill themselves. They're also marks to book any fucking celebrity, and I use those quotation marks, because they might sell 50 tickets. And I had somebody on Twitter say, well, what's the difference in David Arquette and Andy Kaufman?
Oh, I saw that. That pissed me off. What a false equivalency right there.
Good God. Andy Kaufman's match with Jerry Lawler, which I was there, was he grabbed Lawler in a headlock. Lawler gave him a back suplex and 2 pile drivers and pinned him with his foot on his fucking chest. If David Arquette had done that, then that might have done something for the wrestling business.
Yeah, plus, I mean, it's totally different. Lawler gave him the headlock, by the way. It wasn't like he got the headlock.
Lawler offered it. Yeah.
You know, Andy Kaufman desperately wanted to be in the wrestling business. He tried to do something with Mike LaBelle. He tried to get Vince McMahon to let him do stuff. The only promoter that would allow him to be involved was Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler also. So it's not like...
But also the thing is, Andy Kaufman was smart to the business, and Andy Kaufman knew that he couldn't be a wrestler. He could be in the wrestling business, but he couldn't be a wrestler. Every time he was in a match anywhere in the Tennessee territory, he was either his partner was a giant wrestler who he hid behind in a handicap match with Jerry Lawler, or when the wrestlers got a hold of him, they took him apart. Or he had a fight with Jimmy Hart, who was another manager in the same size as him, and boy, that was the most entertaining shit that he did physically. But it was presented as legitimate. And Andy Kaufman had no delusions whether they would train him how to do these things or not, that he would ever be allowed to do them on a wrestling program, because it would have exposed everybody else. It would have looked stupid. What Andy did was brilliant. And Kaufman and Lawler is the thing that even some people in the business, it was the most preposterous thing in the history of wrestling on the surface of it when you look at it. And it's the one thing that people believed about professional wrestling for 20 years through the 80s and 90s. That's the one thing that more people believed about wrestling than anything else that was real, was Lawler and Kaufman, because they did it right. It wasn't just some fucking, like I said, I'm sorry, David, but a midlife fucking crisis apparently, or if he felt that bad that the wrestling fans hated him because the Archbishop of Talentberry made him the WCW World Champion, then why didn't he just goddamn contribute 20 grand to the fucking Cauliflower Alley Club or something? What the fuck? To get in the ring and become a wrestler and have the audacity and the ego to think that you should just because you can and be allowed to? If somebody had come to me in the 90s in the WWF when I was an on-camera manager and said we're going to put the belt on you. If Patterson or Vince or anybody, I would have refused it. It would have been disrespectful. And Jimmy Hart won the Southern title one time for a week. Okay, that's the Southern title, and it's in Memphis, and it was explained, blah, blah, blah. But a major world championship, I can't believe he didn't say, no, you got to be on fucking acid. No, he was a mark, and he let him do it because he looked at wrestling like fucking showbiz, just like fucking Dickhead did. It doesn't mean anything. It's all a fucking hoot and a goof. If I would have turned down and refused a world championship, whether they wanted to put it on me or not, then who's fucking David Arquette to accept it to begin with? He was a jack-off fucking actor that looked at wrestling like a hoot. And the jack-off writer that also looked at wrestling like a fucking hoot wanted to get his name in goddamn the National Enquirer instead of the wrestling magazines. He had the Kevin Dunn syndrome where he wanted to be a real producer Pinocchio instead of in the wrestling business. Fuck all of them. Just now that I worked myself up, thinking about this, I was going to be halfway nice, David Arquette. Fuck you, David Arquette. I didn't come to Hollywood and drop my pants at a movie studio and take a shit on your kitchen table. So fuck you. Fuck all the deathmatch fucks. And I feel bad for the Marco Stunt kid, so I won't fuck him. I'll fuck all the fucking stupid outlaw promoters with no sense that let a kid do shit like that on a show. And that move, I'm sure he's done probably things that were just as crazy every night of his 2.5-month career and every show that he worked. But fuck all the goddamn promoters that don't have bookers that something like that would have had to been cleared by, so that anybody who'd ever been around wrestling for any length of time could have told him what the fuck was the matter with it and what was going to go wrong with it. And why would you allow somebody to do that to begin with? Because it's a bunch of fucking marks putting on a show for a bunch of drunks in a fucking bar. And this kid could be...
Back to Kaufman real quick, Jim. He wanted to cut heel promos. He loved watching the heels growing up. He loved Fred Blassie. He wanted to be that. He didn't want to be the Dynamite Kid. He didn't want to go out there and jump onto his head. I mean, that's the difference. But what influenced him was that. It wasn't, I'm going to delude myself and I'm going to become a professional wrestler.
Anyway, if we've done nothing else today, and we probably really haven't, at least we've taught people what the exposing the business really means, at least to me, because I have the power of cognitive thought and can concentrate on several things at the same time. It's not just telling people whether it's a work or not, or predetermined or not, or whatever your term for it is. It's exposing the business in a negative light, in a negative way, making impressions, whether they be subconscious impressions or just blatant out and out, I don't want to see any more of this shit, like when you see a fucking death match, or just the subconscious impressions on people that this shit's easier than it is, or it's not to be taken seriously, or anybody can do it, or it doesn't hurt that bad, or it's all fucking, it's so staged in Hollywood that this is not worth my emotional investment. All of those things. And that's the way people form opinions, cumulative impressions, tens of hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands over our lifetime, forms the way we think about shit. And every time something like this happens, it just makes wrestling look fucking stupid, and the people in it look fucking stupid, because the people in this kind of wrestling are fucking stupid.
Yeah, when has wrestling ever gotten any good publicity from David Arquette?
Well, I mean, that's the point. They have proven here recently, especially, wrestling has proven the old saying wrong, any kind of publicity is good publicity, because no, a lot of it's just stupid publicity. And I'll say this, and then I'm going to fucking sign off for this week. I also make the point that somebody sooner or later is going to get killed, right? Somebody sooner or later is going to kill their fucking idiot self. And then you know what's going to happen. Just like here in Kentucky, the state examined wrestling with a fine-tooth comb because that garbage, hardcore IWA, Ian Rotten bullshit. Guys OD'd, paid off in pain pills, airlifted to fucking hospitals for blood loss, all that bullshit that he did. and the commission became the strictest in the country. That can happen other places, or depending on who kills themselves and how spectacularly and whether they're on fire or not at the time, it might be looked at by the fucking government. In which case, if wrestling gets regulated, I'm pretty sure I know the only promotion that's going to pass the regulations of this fucking government. So if you really want the WWE to be a monopoly, keep encouraging these fucking backyard outlaw mud show amateurs to do this stupid shit and go see it and buy a ticket to support them. And then all the wrestling you will have is the WWE, and you'll take it and like it with a smile on your face, or you won't. Fuck. You know what is going to make me feel better to end this show, Brian?
I don't know.
I think that I should recite the Pledge of Allegiance for all the Cult of Cornette members out there.
All right.
We pledge allegiance to the leader of the mighty Cult of Cornette and to the pro wrestling for which he stands. No blow-up dolls, dick spots, or dance routines, with blood, sellouts, and shoot angles for all. Available at JimCornette.com. Be a member of the Cult of Cornette, folks, and keep running these outlaw mud show promoters out of business for the sake of all of us. We can't let the Trump administration regulate wrestling. That's the only thing they'd want to regulate. And in parting, for the sick Brian and the sick and tired Jim Cornette, thank you, fuck you, bye-bye, everybody.